Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Mom's Favorites, Books My Mother Loved. So, first of all, I need to thank everybody who got me up to 300 subscribers, because even if when I go to upload this video after I've finished recording it and I discover it has dropped below that, I was actually over 300 subscribers, so to all those of you who have clicked that subscribe button, thank you. I am shocked and pleased that I managed to reach that new milestone, we'll call it, so soon after I had hit 250. So that, first of all, wow and thank you. I'm also going to follow this particular video up in fairly short order with a final video wrapping this up. It's now been literally years since my mother passed, and this project has taught me some things about her that I would never have known simply because of the kind of relationship that we had. It's also reiterated some things for me that that I already knew about her, but brought them back up. So it's been a bit of a thing for me. Anyhow, after this, just so you all know, there will be, in fact, another series of books assigned by my father, who had picked the first series, the Literary Chatter series, and he's picked all of the books on this because, of course, if there was anyone in my life who knew my mother better, I would not know them. So, there will be another such series following this of books of doubtless greater literary import than many of the things that I post on this channel. But to get on with this, this final book in this particular sub-series, and the particular book in the Pallisers and everything, is The Duke's Children. So, in this book, we finally have the Pallisers as being genuinely and wholly at the center of the book. This book starts off with Glencora Palliser, the man who was once Plantagenet Palliser, has become the Duke, and thus Lady Glencora Palliser became her Grace the Duchess. She passes away. She dies at the start of this book, and it really just throws a wrench in the Duke's works, because in spite of the fact that he and his wife never, to me at least, ever seemed to truly understand each other or fit together, when you live with someone and have that person as part of your family for decades, you know, losing that person will leave a hole in your life, even if you don't get along with them all that well. And he did love his wife, for all that he wasn't very good at being demonstrative of it, and for all that he always had this trouble with her and this back and forth with her where she wanted things or thought things or believed things that were antithetical to a lot of his viewpoints. She was his wife. And so the book opens with him sort of mentally spinning out, because he doesn't really know what to do with himself, and more than that, he doesn't know what to do about his children. I mean, his eldest son is in his 20s, and his youngest, his daughter, is, I mean, she's in her late teens, early 20s as well. She is, I believe, of an age of coming out, so at least 18. And he doesn't really know how to handle things or deal with things, because the sort of person that he is not somebody who's very openly affectionate. He's not somebody who's very good at being a family man, so he's not entirely certain of how to handle either his sons or his daughter, who in some ways take far more after their mother than maybe he would have liked. His eldest son is kind of ever so slightly a ne'er-do-well. He's a bit of that trope of the incredibly wealthy young man who, with all the money in the world at his disposal, winds up doing things like falling in with this Major Tifto character, who is a gambler and a man who runs horses. And Tifto is basically, he's a social climber, but he's also the kind of person who, he's not sort of fundamentally a liar so much as a person who is so caught up in trying to impress people and be seen as impressive that he lies as a matter of course in order to do so. So it's sort of a habitual lying, but it's not compulsive so much as a desperate desire to impress, I suppose you could call it. Anyways, but Tifto is the bad friend who's constantly tempting young Silverbridge, who is named Plantagenet after his father, and nobody calls him that, everybody calls him Silverbridge. And that's his bad friend. His good, responsible friend, although a friend that perhaps the elder Duke Palliser is less than enchanted with, is a conservative-leaning young man named Frank Trager, and Frank is in this book in two roles, so to speak. He's Silverbridge's responsible friend, but he is also an admirer and hopeful. He wants to marry the Duke Palliser's youngest child, his daughter. And the problem with Trager is that he's not quite of the same class as the Duke. He's not minor nobility, and he's not wealthy. And so, while the Duke can talk good game about equality in the House of Commons, can talk good game about the fact that any, schlub from any background can, at least in theory, crawl his way to the top to become Prime Minister, at the same time, he doesn't apply that to his class, to, intermarriage between dukes and everything else. That he's a liberal and believes that the poor and ill-educated should be brought closer to the upper classes, the wealthy classes, the well-educated classes, and he believes this, but at the same time, he looks at his kind and feels that they shouldn't mix with the lower classes. And it's problematic, and heartily pointed out in this book that it is a problematic viewpoint. And this is the first book, the only book in this series, where the adventurer, the person who's trying to better himself in life, who is trying to reach above their station, this is the first book in which two people of that sort actually are wind up being the right people, being good people, and wind up, in effect, marrying above their station. First is Frank Trager, who at the end of the book does indeed get to marry Mary. And there is an American, Isabel Boncassen, who arrives partway through the book, and after Silverbridge has started trying to woo Lady Mabel Grex, who his father approves of, but also because at the start of the book Silverbridge is convinced that he's in love with Lady Mabel, and Lady Mabel turns him down flat. I mean, he doesn't ask her to marry him, but it's very, very clear he's working towards it, and she goes, "Oh, ha 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 ha, "You are like a child to me. You're so immature. You're just a friend. I would never want to marry you." And Silverbridge, not particularly surprisingly, takes this to mean, "I don't want to marry you." And after a few further such rejections, because he tries again, especially after he told his father that he had wanted to ask, her in particular to marry him, he gives it the good old college try a couple more times, and it doesn't work, and he gives up on her. And in the meantime, he has met Isabel Boncassen, who is, yes, American, and more than that, her father, although a highly intellectual university professor, was the son of a laborer, and is therefore wholly outside of the acceptable bounds of what the Duke would consider, an acceptable marriage partner for his son. But she is intelligent and sparkling and delightful and, of course, beautiful. And Silverbridge falls for her and decides that he wants to marry her instead of Lady Mabel, which, by the way, is about the same time that he stops being so against his sister marrying Frank Trager, because he can no longer say, well, you shouldn't marry somebody below your station if he's going to marry the American granddaughter of a day laborer. That's just... there's a point at which you can't hold out on that anymore. And he meets Isabel Boncassen and decides to go out with her, and Lady Mabel Grex kicks up a huge stink about it. A huge stink that, although she appears to sort of intellectually understand that she drove him away and told him no and sneered down her nose at him, and then she starts kicking up but she still nonetheless kicks up a huge stink in a way that makes me feel very much like she didn't realize that when she told him no, he took her at his word, and that you can't say no and expect people to think it means yes, and then act offended when they assume that your no means no. More than that, this is actually a thing we should as a civil society expect. That is, if somebody says no, then we assume that what they mean is no, and treat them as such. And I say this on two levels, because first of all, consent is a very important thing, and if people say no, then no should just be no. But also because if somebody's going to start playing games, they should be shut down. And if you say no, everybody should take you at your word and assume you're saying no because you mean no, and not give your games even the slightest hint of attention, because people need to not do that. So Lady Grex winds up on the outs in the course of this, by the end of this book, because she was so busy playing games that it didn't occur to her that if she was, not very nice to somebody, that they would probably wind up saying, fine, then I'm done with you and I'm moving on to the next thing. So, like I said, though, what's most interesting in this book is after the rest of this series, where you've had character after character who is a bad person getting into these relationships for nothing but money, you spend the whole book in dire tension, worried that these characters are going to turn out to be after money, or that somebody's going to get railroaded into marrying in the way that it's very clear Lady Glencora was at the start, or before the start of the books, I suppose you could say. And when you get to the end, and I haven't even gone through these pictures. I didn't have as many pictures as usual, just because there were a lot of pictures that they weren't the same, but they kind of repeated similar visual moments, and so I just skipped them. Here we go, a wedding. When you get to the end and both of these characters, both Mary and Silverbridge, are married, it's a weird sort of anticlimax in its way. Because there's just this tension right up until the end that something's going to turn around, oddly. It doesn't, and it's a tremendous relief, but it's nonetheless kind of odd. So that's that's basically everything I'm going to say, because I've run out of time, because I wasted all that time at the start, and I'll see you all next week.